Racine Heritage Museum, and in honor of Black History Month, we wanted to bring you some Underground Railroad videos. So today we're going to just do an overview of what the Underground Railroad is, some of the things that it entailed, and then in the later videos we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the Underground Railroad here in Racine, some of the laws that impacted the Underground Railroad, and also a specific Underground Railroad story, the Joshua Glover story. So Allison's going to begin by giving a little bit of background information.
Okay, so what is the Underground Railroad? It's not actually a physical railroad. It was a secret movement by people and freedom-seeking slaves to move slaves from the south to the north where they could live a free life. The Underground Railroad is estimated to have started around 1820, before there was actual railroads. So the railroad system didn't start coming into development until the 1830s. So interestingly enough, it probably wasn't originally called the Underground Railroad. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unknowns in terms of the history of the Underground Railroad because, as I said, it was a secret movement. So you couldn't exactly write down maps of, hey, go here. It was also illegal. Doing this went against federal law, so it's not like people could, leave behind physical evidence. Additionally, a lot of the people participating in the Underground Railroad were freed Black people themselves, and a lot of them were illiterate. And obviously the slaves who were freedom-seeking were illiterate as well. So there wasn't a whole lot of written testimony or historical documents to go back to. So we're dealing with a lot of unknowns about the Underground Railroad, but it's still a really great system and a really great topic to explore. So Kari, take it away.
Yeah, so some of the things that we wanted to talk about, terms like the conductors.
Oh, yes.
They called them conductors. It would be people that were helping freedom seekers to get to freedom in the North. It's interesting that they did use sort of terminology because a lot of the Underground Railroad hinged on people using code and talking about things in other language. So the conductors would have been the people helping. A station would have been a place where a freedom seeker could stop and take a break. Station masters would have been maybe people who were coordinating the whole thing. So a lot of things went into it. But I wanted to take some time and talk about just the incredible obstacles that people faced when they decided to leave their slavery conditions in the South. I don't think in 2021 we can really wrap our minds around how difficult this might be, but I wanted to just sort of lay a groundwork. So imagine that you have no identity other than the last name that the slave master or slaveholder has given you. You don't have rights. You don't have property. They were not allowed to own property. Most of them did not have money or were not allowed to have money. They couldn't read or write. They couldn't even travel during the daytime, even if they weren't escaping. Just under normal conditions, they couldn't travel during the daytime without a note. So all of this would have to be done at night. So imagine trying to go someplace, you don't know where it is, you don't know the geography of the country that you're in, much less the immediate surrounding area. You have to go at night, you have to hope that there's a clear sky, you have to hope that it doesn't rain, you have to hope you don't get injured or sick or face wild animals or all the different perils that could happen out in the wilderness. A lot of the slaveholders actually lied to the slaves about the North. They told them that it was winter all the time, which isn't far off. But
it's only a few months out of the year.
A few months and it's not winter, but yes, they told them it was winter all the time. They told them that people in the North and in Canada were very mean and evil. So they had that going against them. They obviously, like I said, it's illegal, it's dangerous as far as getting hurt, injured, sick. And then who to trust? They were told different people that they could rely on to help them, but a lot of times the information was incomplete, and sometimes they would even be told things by members of their own race in an effort of that person trying to gain reward money. And so they would be tricked by people because of other people trying to get reward money. So having to know who to trust, who not to trust would be just incredibly difficult. And then making this journey on foot, sometimes barefoot, without proper clothing, you know, just leaving with the clothes on your back, constantly wondering if people were behind you. It's really just unfathomable. And so the one thing I wanted to touch on also is why Racine? Why was Racine such a special place for the Underground Railroad? Racine really had a culture of abolitionist sentiments. It was very unpopular to be pro-slavery in Racine, to the point where I've read different accounts of, you know, people being in a tavern and saying something that was in agreement with any of the pro-slavery laws, and, you know, basically being thrown out. And so people in Racine were very anti-slavery, and it just wasn't even a question. That was what people here believed, and they would back it up. And because of that, when these pro-slavery laws that Allison's going to speak about, when these came down, people in Racine absolutely refused to cooperate with them. So,
so there were a lot of laws that enabled slavery, starting way before the Underground Railroad was even a thing. And because of those laws, slaves and freedom seekers needed to try and get ultimately out of the country, because you could make it to a northern state, but that does not exempt you from those federal laws. So a lot of freedom seekers went to Canada or Mexico or Spanish Florida, anywhere that was not the United States at that point. Back in 1787, with the Constitutional Convention, the number of representatives in government was officially declared to be determined by population. This actually ended up being very much in the South state's favor, because not only was the population of white citizens counted, but the population of non-white people, because they weren't considered citizens, non-white people was counted for 3/5 of their number. So it gave the South more power through representation in the government. And yet these people that they were counting were not given any rights. They were not considered citizens. They were not given any property or their own names. So it really shows you how a lot of the laws and the structure was put in place to keep slavery. Later on, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 made it illegal for freedom seekers to be free. So a freedom-seeking slave, regardless of whether they went north, could still be returned into slavery. It was an unpopular law, and it was not very embraced heavily by the northern states until 1850, when reenactment of the law essentially made it stricter and forced the northern states to comply with them. Now southern slaveholders and marshals were able to enter free states and just take the people back. After that, we have a notable development was the Dred Scott case. And this was a freedom seeker who had moved to the northern states. He lived for a time in Wisconsin and then Minnesota. And he eventually ended up suing for his freedom when they tried to take him back into slavery. In this case, went all the way to the Supreme Court, which was very heavily favored in the South. Southern representatives were in the Supreme Court, and ultimately the Supreme Court ruled that that freedom-seeking slaves are not citizens, so therefore they have no right to sue for their freedom. And ultimately Dred Scott lost that case, which was a huge turning point in the movement for abolitionism. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. We will be doing another video next time on Racine, specifically in the Underground Railroad, and how it worked in our own community. And that'll be that. I lost my train of thought.
Bye.